How am I against Sweet Baby Inc. and against gamers? Those are the only two options. Those are the only two sides in this story. In fact, I've seen some of the artwork for one of the characters in Dragon Ball Z, and I would say that may actually be a fair criticism. And a new page in the settings called diversity settings. You're depriving us of our source of income. That's like a violation of our human rights. You don't want us to be able to exist comfortably just because you don't like our product, or just because you don't like the things we've said. Like, yes, absolutely! That's absolutely why. I feel like Mr. Krabs ringing the bell when he's been doing the same thing for weeks straight, going fucking insane. Day 15, give it up for day 15. This is the 15th time I feel like I've heard gamers complain about anti-consumer practices, and yet not one of those times have they just stopped buying the products or services that they're complaining about. So I don't care about taking their complaints serious, because they don't even take their own complaints serious enough not to pay these companies and incentivize them to keep fucking them over. So no, the problem isn't Sweet Baby, the problem is real babies who, like infants, lack the basic understanding of cause and effect to realize if you buy bad games, it's going to incentivize those companies to keep putting out cheaper to produce bad games than spending all the time and effort to make a good game that sells the same number of copies. What is up, my goofy goobers? Welcome back to another episode of the Commentary Critter. Today we're going to be doing a retrospective on the whole Sweet Baby Inc. controversy. If you're here for a history lesson, I don't care, so get out of here. This is my commentary, and if you'd like to stick around for that, I appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So who is Sweet Baby Inc.? We've all heard the name, we all have a rough idea what they do, so let's not spend too long on this, let's just touch on it real quick. From their website itself, it says, founded in 2018, Sweet Baby Inc. is a narrative development and consultation studio based in Montreal and working around the globe. Our mission is to tell better, more empathetic stories while diversifying and enriching the video games industry. We aim to make our games more engaging, more fun, more meaningful, more inclusive for everyone. I just want to add on their website, when you move your cursor, the baby's eyes follow you, and that about gave me a heart attack at first. I thought I was hallucinating or something. I thought maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night, but nope, this is just a feature. In terms of what games they've worked on, they actually seem to be a pretty reputable company too. They have Alan Wake 2, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Suicide Squad, The Crew, Motorfest. They have a lot of pretty popular games under their belt that they've worked on. So from the outside looking in, it seems like a very reputable consulting studio, and you wouldn't think anything too absurd is going on underneath the hood. I'm sure you've heard this story 1,000 times from 1,000 other YouTubers at this point, so I'm not going to spend too long harping on the background as much as I am going to give my thoughts on everything and my perspective on how I feel like this looks from the optics perspective for the company, how I feel about these people's personal, viewpoints, their ideologies, or their ethics, or morals, things of that nature. It's more so going to be my commentary on this than me recapping the story, so if you're here for a recap, I'm sorry to say this probably isn't the best video for it. So everything hits the fan when this group called Sweet Baby Inc. Depicted is created on Steam. It is a Steam group dedicated to listing every game that Sweet Baby Inc. has been a consultant for, so that the consumers can be informed about who has worked on the products that they're purchasing. Though this group did admittedly, foster an environment where a lot of people who are genuinely intolerant and are genuinely hateful or spiteful for reasons beyond anything they can elaborate on, were actually, saying hateful things or saying, we need to, stop this ideology from spreading. It's a scourge. And the creators of the group were like, hey, we get you, we get it, we hear your voices, but that isn't the type of group we're trying to make. This is supposed to be completely neutral. We're not trying to give a perspective. We're not trying to tell you how to feel about this company. We're simply just trying to inform you of if they were present in this project or not. And that seemed to be taken of as a cop-out by some of the employees of Sweet Baby Inc. Personally, I hate the idea that a super vocal minority of radical individuals represent the entirety of a group simply because they have the most shocking takes, and so they get promoted the most in these, controversy and engagement-based algorithms. People say, oh, if you support X party, then you must be blank, and it's the most hyperbolic thing ever. If you're on the left, you must be a lollipop. If you're on the right, you must be a racist. There's, on that spectrum, people always come to the biggest extremes because the actual extremists are the loudest online and the algorithms reward them the most favorably. Post any opinion online, you're going to get people who say the opposite of what you want to hear, and they're going to say it in the meanest way possible. That doesn't mean that's everybody. That's what we call a straw man. And I know that word's lost all value because everybody uses it incorrectly because they've heard one debate and they think they're a massive intellectual. But this is basically an actual case of a straw man. Out of a community of 8,000 people, you might get 20 people, maybe 50 people, who are angry enough to spam these comments. And chances are, they'll spam these comments a lot, and they'll spam it everywhere where they see these people they don't like. That's a very vocal minority, whereas you have 8,000 other people, 7,950 other people, who genuinely don't care enough to comment on this issue. They just want to know if Sweet Baby Inc. has worked on their game so they can respectfully and privately decline to consume that product, as a consumer should have the right to be informed about the makers of the product they're consuming and what is within it. It's not like these people are hiding in the shadows either. They're literally bragging. They're posting front and center on the website. Here's the mainstream games we've worked on: God of War, Ragnarok, Alan Wake 2, Suicide Squad. Yeah, they're not trying to make this private either. So I don't get why they're so upset when people are simply compiling a list of the games they've worked on. Well, if they're so upset about that, why don't they take down their own website? Why don't they report their own website? Because their website has a massive compilation of all the games they've worked on, and it informs the consumers on whether to buy those products or not. So if you can't go to the Sweet Baby Curator page, even better than that, go to the Sweet Baby website, where they'll even find the most obscure products. You don't have to ask them, or you don't have to go onto a Steam page and do hours of research trying to find any reference to Sweet Baby Inc. They've laid it all out for you. Just go to their website and look at it yourself. To my understanding, Sweet Baby Inc. is currently violating their own standards worse than the Sweet Baby Inc. detected group, because Sweet Baby Inc. has made a curated list of all the games they've worked on, and even worse than that, they went as far as to state their opinion on what you should do in reference to that curated list, which is you should purchase the games because they're very diverse and inclusive and open-minded. This group is doing nothing that Sweet Baby Inc. hasn't done. In fact, they're doing less. They have only posted the curated list that Sweet Baby Inc. themselves has posted, but I think they've even, even though it started politically charged, they've done a lot of effort to make sure there is no political charging and no acceptance of, people being radical just to be edgy or contrarian or whatever. They've weeded that out, so now it's just exclusively, not even don't buy Sweet Baby Inc. games, it's Sweet Baby Inc. detected. Here is the list that is publicly available on their website, but because there isn't a high overlap between people looking for inclusivity consultant firms and people who play Steam games and read Steam game reviews or look at curator lists on Steam, we want to post this here too. That's all it is. The only issue I see is this company uses their curator list as an advertisement for how good they are, whereas this group uses that same curator list they themselves, Sweet Baby Inc. themselves made, as a de-advertisement, if you will, for saying, this group doesn't put out the best quality work. In fact, it seems the games they work on don't end up so well. I mean, Suicide Squad has less than quadruple-digit players despite being one of the largest live service launches of the year. But if they have an issue with that, I want to ask, why is that a problem that consumers voice their honest opinions? It shouldn't be an issue if consumers voice their honest opinions when they're negative, because we sure don't have a problem when they voice their opinions when they're positive. Not to mention, sometimes companies overinflate the value of their product or service so much it actually becomes deceptive marketing. And even in the US, where we have some restrictions against that, and even in the EU, where I know they have some restrictions against that, companies always find a way around it. They have millions, if not billions of dollars at their disposal. You'd be an absolute fool to think they're not going to have at least one lawyer on hand to figure out, how can we word this so we're not being deceptive, but we're still really making our, we're really making our product sell. That's called advertising, dude. That is an entire field, and it is worth billions, tens of billions, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars annually. You think they're not going to find a way to get around that? So then, when we as consumers fall for those deceptive advertisements and purchase a product or service that is absolutely sub-quality and not what they've advertised, what are we supposed to do? Run counter ads for millions of dollars? The average person can't afford to do that. Or if they can't afford to, they're not invested enough about this one product or service to run counter ads. No, in the age of the internet, the best thing we can do as consumers is post about it to our followers, or post about it to our close friends and family, or tell our friends and family in person, hey, this business advertises some good stuff, but when I bought their product or service, it was really subpar. I wouldn't recommend their stuff. Or you make a curated list or a blog post or something like that. And if you think it's harassment or brigading businesses to voice your concerns, well, then you probably think they need to remove the bottom 3 stars on the App Store so you can only leave 4 or 5-star reviews. But that's okay though anyway, because if you leave a 3 or lower star review, they'll probably just ask Apple to delete it anyway, or Google Play. It's as if we're reaching a point where you can only say positive things about companies, and if you say negative things about companies, somehow that's harassment, when we're forgetting part of our entire point as consumers is to let these companies know when they're fucking up. I feel like this is going to get to be such an issue with it's harassment to criticize a business for their practices, that we're going to get to the point where even your local plumber can advertise, I'm the best plumber in the county, you can hire me, anything will last 2 years. And you hire him, and he fixes your sink, and it's such a bad job. Later plumber goes in and goes, holy crap, did this guy even know what he's doing? It sprung the leak in 48 hours. And you post on Facebook pissed, and you go, I hired this guy for a premium rate, saying he's the best plumber in the county. This other plumber came over and said it broke within 48 hours because of a shoddy repair job. Never hire this guy for his work. And that guy comes up to your work, your house with a cease and desist and says, you're harming my business. I make a living off plumbing. You can't say mean things about me. If you want to leave a 5-star review on my website, well, I make my living off plumbing, so that's going to be great. But I make my living off plumbing, so if you're going to leave anything less than a 5-star review, well, I'm going to have to take that review down, and I'm going to have to report you for harassment. This feels classist. Are you anti-blue collar? Are you targeting me because I'm a blue collar worker? You don't support blue collar workers, mom and pop businesses? I'm a local worker, dude. This is harassment. This is clearly classism at play. How are we supposed to hold businesses accountable for shady practices if every time we vocalize their shady practices or subpar standards they fail to meet, and then they go, oh, it's harassment, this is how we make our income, how dare you deprive us of our income, this is a human rights violation, take down this hate. No, you're providing a faulty service, and that's capitalism. That's how capitalism works. It is a market. It is a free market, and it's a market of ideas. If your idea is worse, you will fail. If your product is worse, you will fail. We've seen it countless times in history. Even the biggest monopolies fail due to poor product quality or poor service quality. The main thing I see is, oh, you're harassing us just because of a few mistakes or just because you don't like the quality of our product. You're depriving us of our source of income. That's like a violation of our human rights. You don't want us to be able to exist comfortably just because you don't like our product or just because you don't like the things we've said. Like, yes, absolutely. That's absolutely why. That's how capitalism works. If I don't like your product or your service or the things you're saying, I have the right to not buy your product. I wasn't aware this was like a government welfare situation where I'm like societally obligated to support your company even if I don't like what you do. What? I walk past the local hot dog stand and I go, oh, I'm really not in the mood for a hot dog. But goddamn, Lord forbid I pass them by because otherwise I'm apparently oppressing small businesses. No, in capitalism, in a free market, if I decided because I'm wearing blue shoes today, I can't get a Coca-Cola because Coca-Colas have red cans, that is perfectly within my right. It doesn't matter how stupid my reasoning is. It doesn't matter if it's verifiably wrong. It doesn't matter if it's illogical, delusional. It doesn't matter. It's perfectly within my right. I should not be forced to consume a product. No one should be forced to consume a product. When you walk down the street, you shouldn't have a government official or police officer come up and hand you a Coke and go, that'll be $5. And if you don't give me that $5, well, and he just pulls out his cuffs and just starts straightening them like a bell. And that concept, that fundamental right that we all have to choose what products we consume and don't consume, is something that is apparently controversial to an individual at Sweet Baby Inc. known as Chris Kindred, and that's where this entire controversy started. On their Twitter, Chris Kindred posted a link to the Sweet Baby Inc. Detected Steve group saying, anyway, report the fuck out of this group to all of their followers, and then followed it up by posting the Steam page of the leader of the group, the creator of the curated list, by saying, and report the creator since he loves his account so much. And by saying report people and their accounts simply for having an opinion that you shouldn't consume this product, they're basically saying, oh, well, if you don't support our services, well, then there's going to be consequences for you. We're going to try to get your account taken away. We're going to try to get you canceled. And that's basically a racket. Now, I understand how you might go, wow, this is a lot of stuff to pull from a couple tweets. This is getting really conspiratorial. I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think they're trying to, racketeer anyone. I think it's just a business model that can be perceived like that from the outside looking in. And you're right, let's not hear it from the outside looking in. Let's hear it from the inside. Let's hear the spokesperson of Sweet Baby Inc. describe how they would recommend their consulting firm to companies, to game development studios.
The co-founder of Sweet Baby Inc. proudly explains the method that she uses to force bosses at game studios to censor, alter, and diversify game projects she feels are problematic, terrify them, aka threaten them with the anger of the cancel culture mob. Okay, let's listen to what's said.
If you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups. And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Right, and so let me explain really what that terror is. 5 tweets that go viral, and then nobody actually cares after that. And I'll give some examples for that. So number 1, Final Fantasy 16 was criticized tremendously because it didn't have representation of different races, and the game was massively successful. Another good example is Hogwarts Legacy. Like, based off of the feedback and the information that was online, it probably was like half the game killing gay people. I mean, it has to be, right? But whenever you play the game, you know that's not the case. And on top of that, it was the best-selling game last year. It sold like 20 million copies. So if they're trying to terrify these media and these marketing teams, cancel culture mobs and people getting angry on Twitter don't mean anything. It's just completely vapid garbage. It's vapid hot air.
There's like a genuine value that you can impress upon them, both ethically and financially. You can say this is important. And
personally, I don't see much different from that than a mobster. Imagine you're a bartender in the 1940s and a mobster comes up to you and goes, hey, those are some real nice windows there, real big, real expensive looking. It'd be a shame if something happened to them. This is a rough part of town. I know some of these guys around here love to be real rowdy around nice, expensive windows like that, especially ones that look so fragile. Tell you what, me and my guys, why don't you get my team up here, hire us $400. We'll call it $400. Once a month, we'll come by. We'll put a seal of approval on these windows, and these guys will know these are certified by us as real good windows, and they won't even bother trying to bash them in, all right? But if you don't pay us, if you don't like the service, if you don't like our windows, I can't promise that those things won't get knocked in a few times, and it won't cost you a pretty penny in the process. And then here comes Sweet Baby Inc. in the same vein. Oh, that product there looks real uninclusive. That's a lot of white leads there. That's a lot of, male leads there. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people online got real riled up and tried to cancel your game, and that would really hurt your profits. But you know what? No, it would cost less than those profits you would lose. My consulting company here, we put our stamp of approval on games to show how diverse and inclusive they are, with our team of diversity experts and people who have lived through all walks of life. So when they see our stamp of approval on your game, they're going to know not to boycott you. They know you're inclusive. And again, it'd be a real shame if anything happened to your game, because what we're looking at isn't very inclusive, and we think people might get real riled up if they find out about this. So again, ball's in your court, but just know we're a lot cheaper. I do not know how you look at both of those two situations and not think they're the same racket. The mafia poise themselves as very vigilant, very compassionate individuals who are simply protecting you from the ruffians, just as these people poise themselves as the inclusive, open-minded individuals who are simply protecting you from the more exclusive, more radical, vicious people online who may not like the lack of inclusivity in your games, when in reality, when you look at these people's tweets, they are the vicious people. Just like how the guy you're hiring to protect your windows from all these hooligans who want to break them is actually the guy who's going to come break in your windows if you don't pay him the $400 a month. These Sweet Baby Inc. people are saying, we're going to protect you from the online radicals trying to cancel your game project. But the moment you don't hire them, they are the online radicals trying to cancel your game project. It is the same racket. Now, I understand how you might go, wow, this is a lot of stuff to pull from a couple tweets. This is getting really conspiratorial. I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't think they're trying to, racketeer anyone. I think it's just a business model that can be perceived like that from the outside looking in. And you're right, let's not hear it from the outside looking in. Let's hear it from the inside. Let's hear the spokesperson of Sweet Baby Inc. describe how they would recommend their consulting firm to companies, to game development studios. The whole thing Sweet Baby Inc. sells is basically morality. They sell how to be inclusive, how to be compassionate, how to be open-minded, how to represent people fairly. Those are all things that kind of stem from concepts of morality. So you would expect when Sweet Baby Inc. is, acting publicly or having public-facing accounts, making public tweets, that they would exemplify that conduct, that very moral conduct that is such a good, there's such moral intellectuals that they're worth hiring as a consulting firm, to where even if your script is already done in A+, you still ought to pay them money because they are such moral intellectuals that just their touch of compassion will make your script better and quell backlash. And yet here's the same person calling for the mass, reporting of a complete free speech Steam curator list, and calling for the mass reporting of a dude's private Steam account, saying less than 24 hours after the death of the Dragon Ball Z creator, Toriyama gave us the best and worst black characters in anime in the same series. It took range to do that. They could not go 24 hours after a man's death without trying to drag him online for social related issues. If these people were so moral that they're worth hiring as a consulting agency just to make your, script more compassionate, then why are they sitting here making these criticisms less than 24 hours after the guy's death? You can completely argue that these are valid criticisms. In fact, I've seen some of the artwork for one of the characters in Dragon Ball Z, and I would say that may actually be a fair criticism. But less than 24 hours after the man's death, if you have any concept of morals, you know that there's a time and a place, and under a day after he passes is not that place, especially not publicly. Now you might be going, oh, someone said a controversial take on Twitter, the site known for rewarding you with monetary incentives for engagement by posting controversial takes. Color me absolutely shocked that someone did that. And I'd say that's a completely fair criticism. And you also might say, hey, this is just an edgy joke. Don't we do this on all sides of the political spectrum and this is just completely accepted? Why can't this person make an edgy joke? And I would also say if this is a joke, which I don't think it is based on this person's, post history and the things that they've shared publicly that they feel, but if that was the case, then I would actually say that this is fine, and this is actually, kind of dark, but if this was a joke, I could perceive this as being a little bit funny, honestly. However, I'm a firm believer in you reap what you sow, and as a result, I don't think we should show charitability to these people that they wouldn't show to their worst enemies. And I think you could tell a lot about someone by how they treat their worst enemies, because that's the person they'll be willing to go most mask off with. And when these people see people that they even perceive as mild enemies, they're willing to try to get their entire Steam account banned just for disagreeing with them. So no, I don't think we should take this joke charitably. I think we should take this as a serious statement and take it uncharitably, if anything, as they've taken the messages of others they perceive as enemies. And since they're directly against people who are just simply trying to practice consumer rights by being educated about who has touched their product, what is in their product, then I don't know. I would say they're anti-consumer, and as a result, they're my enemy, so why should I perceive them charitably? It's not because of any of the protected classes they're in, it's because they're inherently anti-consumer in their practices, and I am a consumer. I shouldn't even need to specify that the reason I dislike them isn't because of any protected classes they're in. It is honestly, genuinely, incredibly hard to find someone who is seriously prejudiced, racist, bigoted, homophobic in some way. Like, it is actually truly hard to find people who are like that. If you go on the internet, you can find 1,000 shitposters who think that, or you can find 1,000 radicals who think that, because you're searching for the most needle-in-a-haystack communities where those things are tolerated. But in real life, that isn't something that happens very often. And if you are within a protected class, it doesn't mean you are able to deflect all criticism because you're in a protected class. It's protected from outright hatred based on just the class you fall into, not protection from any criticism for your actual, the actions that are separate from your identity. One of my favorite quotes is that to figure out who is oppressed and who is protected, all you need to do is figure out who you can criticize and who you can't. And my favorite counter to that joke is, oh, the kids with leukemia have been pulling the strings the entire time. But to an extent, the quote does actually hold some weight, and there is some truth to it. If you can't criticize someone who's within a quote-unquote protected class because they're oppressed, not because of your criticism is invalid, but because they're simply within that class, well, that's someone you can't criticize. And people you can't criticize tend to be the oppressors and not the oppressed. And I just want to laugh at the whole protected class thing, because everybody who gets protected class status never wants to give it up once the circumstances of society are different. If we were playing that game, I'm still a protected class as a white male because we were the most likely to be enslaved back in the day, 2,000 years ago. And though it is more relevant for some groups like the LGBTQ and the trans people, because, in the 90s, 2000s, and even to some extent the 2010s, they did still face some extent of oppression. Nowadays, in 2024, that just simply is no longer the case. It just feels that in a society supposedly with an Illuminati cabal pulling the strings and fitting everything to their will, made up of straight white men, that if you criticize straight white men, that you would get vanished the same way you would in Saudi Arabia if you were genuinely oppressed, or at least something very bad would happen to you, something very unpleasant. And yet that doesn't seem to be the case. But if you do say, for instance, Joe Schmo24 tweets as a joke, I hate trans black women, again, as a joke, Joe Schmo, 24, they might have their career ruined. They might have bad things happen to them. They might have people show up at their house after doxing them and spraying transphobe on their windows and things of that nature. It's not actually as uncommon as if someone were to tweet out, I hate straight white men, and then the skinheads show up to their house. It is far more common for these, protected class groups to act as instigators or to act as oppressive types than to act as actual oppressed. I'm just saying, if I was an oppressed group, I wouldn't feel like I have the ability to go around, voicing these opinions. And I definitely wouldn't feel so bold as to think I could outright protest the groups oppressing me and get away with it. If I was in Saudi Arabia, I would in no way think that I had the right to protest the regime without facing some dire consequences. Yet in America, you are much more likely to face dire consequences like social isolation, being, laid off from your job, or your friends and family scolding you for standing against these protected groups than you are for standing with them. So that makes you ask, if they were really oppressed, then why aren't you getting rewarded for standing against them as opposed to harmed for standing against them? I think people forget that it takes the average of an entire society to warrant using systemic terms such as oppression or discrimination that require a very large pool of participation and uniform thought. For there to be systemic oppression warranting the creation of protected statuses for certain groups, then that would require the overwhelming majority of society to not be encompassed of that group and to see that group as worthy of persecution and then act on it. And yet that isn't the case. In fact, the overwhelming majority of society seems to see it more fit to stand with those groups and warranting of persecution to those who stand against them. So then that isn't discrimination. If anything, that is social acceptance, social equity, and if anything, you could even argue it's privilege. People in protected classes who like to claim discrimination are the first people to tell you that any benefit you have, any privilege you have, comes at the expense, comes at the oppression of others. Well, if they're getting the benefit of society always standing for them, even in cases where they're verifiably wrong, like when they were warranting group harassment with the Sweet Baby Inc. instance, and yet even the Department of Justice is funding groups that stand with them, then you gotta ask, who is getting the shit end of the stick by their own logic? And who is getting the shit end of the stick in this situation? It is a group as broad as gamers and consumers who simply want product transparency. Some of these gamers may fall into these same protected classes and just simply not like the works of Sweet Baby Inc., and yet they're being lumped into these groups of oppressors who are doing it based on an identity that they share with these people, simply because they want to know who has handled their game and what is within it. Go to a restaurant and ask, who has handled my food and what is the ingredients of this food? They will tell you instantly, and if they don't, they get shut down by the FDA because that is deemed a harmful business practice to consumers because it will lead to the people possibly getting complacent and cutting corners or doing things to their food that could harm people. And even if they don't harm people, it has been deemed that it is a consumer's right to know what it is that they are consuming. Imagine I hand you a box and I say $50 for the box, and I'm not going to tell you what's in it. And if you tell me you want to know what's in the box, I'm going to start calling you names and say you're oppressing me. That is absolutely ridiculous. And that example might seem facetious to you. That might seem like a completely ridiculous example. And you're absolutely right, because that is downplaying what Sweet Baby Inc. is doing, because at least in my example, you have the right to refuse to buy the box. In Sweet Baby Inc.'s example, the words from their CEO herself, you don't have the right to refuse their service, because if you refuse to pay them for their service, they're going to go stir up, they're going to instigate conflict that will result in the harm of your company. So that's equivalent to someone going, if you do not buy this box, I'm going to kick your kneecap in on your way out, and that's going to cost you a lot more than this box would have. And I think there's something very paradoxical about having a relatively successful company that markets, the voices of those who are oppressed. Because if those people were actually oppressed, well then society wouldn't want to hear their voices enough for your company to be successful. Let's just speculate what happens if an actually oppressed group tries to form a business off of selling that oppressed identity and voice. Let's say a feminist group in Saudi Arabia tries to form a consultancy firm for writing in video games. Let's make it very parallel to this. Well, not only are they oppressed, so they probably need their husband's approval to make that company, the Saudi Arabian government is very anti-women's rights and may very well disappear the women who try to put their names on that LLC. And even if they do by some miracle get to the public marketplace, it's very likely that in a society that genuinely oppresses women, men aren't interested in hearing their perspectives, and so the business won't be financially viable and will collapse that way. So to see a company that is able to have such success off of selling these quote-unquote oppressed perspectives and voices, I don't think they're actually oppressed. I think they're selling first world oppression, not real oppression, and that is a completely different bar. And I think that the fact that they've showed any success here proves that maybe they aren't as oppressed as they think they are at the end of the day. So my question remains, if you are actually oppressed to the extent you say you are, to where it is a marketable thing, that you are so oppressed and your voices are so unheard that it is worth consulting and paying money just to hear, then why are you doing so well? You could argue that it is unique perspectives worth hearing, and then it's perfectly valid. But oppressed perspectives, you cannot, because you are finding success, which shows that there's demand to hear your voices, and the oppressed, their voices are not in demand. There is no marketable demand for the representation of Uyghur populations in China. There is no marketable demand for the representation of feminist ideals in Saudi Arabia. There is no marketable demand for the concepts of civil liberties in North Korea. Actual oppression is unapologetic, it is brutal, it is in your face, and it is unrelenting. The experience and voices of the oppressed that Sweet Baby is marketing is the experience and voices of the first world oppressed, the people whose writing was genuinely bad, and instead of taking the advice of better writers, they decided to deflect criticism by pretending it was all about a protected class they fell within to. And it's crazy because a lot of the people that they're calling bigots, saying that they're transphobic and they're racist or things of that nature for criticizing Sweet Baby Inc., are trans people, or they are people of color who are simply criticizing the quality of writing with Sweet Baby Inc. and how every game they touch seems to get worse reviews than games they don't touch. And you might say, well, Sweet Baby Inc. is oppressed. There's people leaving racist and homophobic and sexist and all these, mean comments on their posts now. Well, for one, Streisand effect, and they fired the first shot with their, unwarranted group harassment. But for two, if they complain about those comments, I'm really not sure why, because that's what's keeping them in business. Their entire business model is we are groups of people who are so oppressed that our voices are never heard, and yet they're so unique and worthwhile that you should add them to your games. Here's proof of you being oppressed, and yet you're complaining about it when that's your entire selling point. Your stock should be going through the roof. Look at all the people oppressing these voices. That's why we really need them in our games. You should be celebrating that your little PSYOP campaign after firing the first shot went so well, and yet they're collapsing under the pressure that should otherwise be making their marketing tactics thrive. If they were able to get hired based off of the merit of their writing alone, then they wouldn't need to include that they were full of diverse and oppressed groups of protected classes, because their writing would simply be so good that they would be hired despite that, and their writing would be so good that it would be able to flawlessly incorporate that diversity in a way that felt like it added so much value to projects that they would be, hollow, they'd be less than without it. And yet Sweet Baby Inc. isn't typically hired because they have such high quality writing that these discriminatory and oppressive companies are willing to overlook their differences and hire them despite that. No. The companies, because Sweet Baby Inc. is full of such, diverse, unique perspectives that are supposed to be oppressed, they are willing to hire them despite the poor quality of their writing. And that is a completely different scenario. But it's not a scenario we don't see with something like a social media grifter, who even if they do fall into an identity or a cause and genuinely care about it, their chances are they're more flag waving and stating the most extreme takes, debate, engagement than they are trying to make the genuine best content for that group of people. Making the best, most representative content is something that takes a lot of talent and skill to do, and it might not pay off super well, but you know it doesn't take much talent or skill at all and often does pay off pretty well? Controversy baiting, aka engagement baiting. All you have to do is take the group of people you've cultivated who already agree with pretty much everything you say, and you need to stir up controversy by stating the most extremist point you can possibly think of, and then when you rightfully get backlash, you're gonna flag wave to all your supporters and go, they're coming after all of us. It doesn't matter if my extremist opinion was extremist, and most of you don't agree with it. Look, they're coming after our team, guys. We gotta protect our team as team players. And all of a sudden their comment section is full of people debating on this topic, and YouTube doesn't care. YouTube does not know you have posted a hate comment. YouTube doesn't know this person is fishing for engagement by controversy baiting. YouTube just sees a ton of comments on a relatively small video, and they go, wow, this is very engaging. Let's blow it up in the algorithm. And whether you are hate commenting or hate watching or not, that grifter still gets a dollar amount from your viewership. And you want to know what one of the most profitable things grifters do in social media is? They do false flag campaigns where they pretend that people are much more upset at their demographic, their identity, or their group than that people actually are. For instance, in the right wing, you'll always see people crying, straight white Christian men are practically being just put down in the streets like it's, 1942 or something. And that just simply isn't the case. And it's because they want their audience of primarily, straight white Christian men to get super riled up and, come to their defense and, Spurg in the comments going, oh my god, this is so right, this is terrible, this is awful. And then the other people who see this video and go, wait, that's not the case, and comment, hey, wait, I don't think this is happening. Suddenly they're hit with 50 comments going, you're just an idiot, you're just ignorant, you're just this, you're just that. And boom, you got a comment war, and that grifter, despite saying something that is verifiably untrue, has probably made a couple $100s, if not thousands. And another benefit of these false flag campaigns or these overinflating actual backlash for your views is it makes your community incredibly strong, incredibly tight-knit, and incredibly loyal if they otherwise weren't. For instance, all it takes to get two, completely opposing countries to suddenly be best buddies for the rest of time is just a common enemy somewhere else. Grifting is such an easy and profitable gig because you spend so long riling people's emotions up that they're too upset, they're too riled up and angry and looking for things to, yell at, that they don't even think to criticize you or to look at your actions. They're too busy criticizing the other people you've pointed out for them to realize that, hey, maybe they should turn some of that criticism back on you and see what it is you're doing. And that kind of grifting business model is something I feel we're very much seeing with Sweet Baby Inc. Because they promote themselves on, we're very moral, we're very compassionate, we're very considerate, we're very inclusive and diverse and open-minded. We are people who will make your game overall just more ethical for being there. And yet, just like how any grifter doesn't really practice the religion they're claiming to be like an extremist for, they don't really follow the beliefs that they're claiming to be a firm believer in, these Sweet Baby Inc. people in their public-facing conduct are inciting mass harassment campaigns, they're making fun of dead people who have died within the last 24 hours, they're making sexist comments, they're making racist comments, they're even attacking people who fall in within their own protected demographics just for simply not agreeing with them, they're threatening businesses, all these things. That is not the conduct of someone who is actually exemplifying the things that they're selling to these companies. That is the conduct of a grifter who realizes as long as they say they're on the side of morality, they'll get a little bit less scrutiny when they start behaving immorally. And Sweet Baby received rightful backlash for, that cognitive dissonance, that disconnect between the ethics and morals that they claim to uphold and sell to other companies versus the ethics and morals that they do not put on display in their public conduct. And yet, it was very strange to see people who are systemically oppressed have the entire system come out swinging for them and not against them. Because all of the gaming news journalists are out in favor of Sweet Baby Inc. And even a Department of Justice funded group is speaking in favor of Sweet Baby Inc., lying by omission that Sweet Baby Inc. started this entire debacle, this entire crusade against them, by harassing a guy who just made a curator list. And like how when a grifter false flags and then still grows their channel even despite the fact that they instigated the conflict, Sweet Baby Inc. came out on top here because they don't care how the public perceives them. They were never selling us their scripts anyway. They were selling their services, their consulting services for script writing, morality and diversity-based script writing, to companies, and all they had to do to prove that they had a place to speak in this issue, and that adding them to their company would be a good thing for your ESG score and your morality and diversity, is by proving that they were discriminated against. And by doing this false flag campaign where they harass another guy and rightfully receive backlash, they get to hypers fixate on the 1% of the 1% of those hate comments that are genuinely people saying homophobic or transphobic things, and they get to chalk it up and pretend that that's the entire group. And the word straw man is overused, but that absolutely is the intended use of the word straw man here. They are taking one person's very extreme view, or one very extremist view of this situation, and saying that that is the view of everybody within that entire broad category of people who are against Sweet Baby Inc. If you hate Sweet Baby Inc., it's because you're one of the extremists who dislike them solely because they're protected classes, not one of the people who maybe even falls into those protected classes, but just doesn't want their writing. And you know exactly what Sweet Baby Inc.'s going to do with those 60 out of the 10,000 tame comments that are genuinely hateful? They're going to take those to the companies and go, what, you thought society had progressed enough to accept people like us, people of color, people who are within the LGBTQ community in 2024? Oh no, sweaty. You have no idea how far behind we are and how much room we have to grow. Look at these hate comments here. These are just because people learned we exist. Just hearing that there are writers who don't have the same identities or the same backgrounds as them or the same skin color, this is the response we get. Look at how silenced our voices are. You would never hear our perspective if we weren't here right now telling you that we're willing to give it to you for just the small price of our consultant fee. Thank you for your time. And given these companies are a lot more likely to read these news articles lying by omission, by not stating that Sweet Baby Inc. started this entire thing with a harassment campaign against a free speech list, they're gonna go, oh wow, they're completely right. Look, I'm reading all these articles and they say these hate mobs just came after them out of nowhere the moment they learned that there was a group of diverse people writing game scripts. These are voices that truly need to be heard. Let's make sure they're on our team, guys. And you might say it's a death sentence to any game that wants to put Sweet Baby Inc. on their writing staff. And I would say that that would be a fair point, because if you destroy your reputation with the entire, market base, all of the gamers who would be purchasing this product, then obviously those gamers are likely to boycott or not purchase that product when they see your stamp of approval on a game that they don't want you in. For one, it's not like Sweet Baby Inc. had their stamp of approval on the front cover of every game they worked on anyway, so if they just don't post the games they work on their website, I honestly don't think anybody will know. Plus, you forget, gamers are spineless little fucking slop goblins who cannot help but consume no matter how bad it is or how many times they complain about it. Every year I hear, COD has gone downhill, dude. I'm not getting the battle pass this year. I'm not getting next year's installment. And every year I hear, look, Bungie finally crossed the boundary. They're selling, actual game influencing items as microtransactions. I'm never playing this again. And then the next battle pass comes out, or the next content update comes out, or the next cool skin comes out, and these people completely fucking forget they've ever said that in their lives, and they whip out their credit cards so fast that it actually causes smoke to come out of their pockets. At least in other communities, they'll boycott products, but in the gaming community, they won't, because either their memory's too short-term to remember they ever had a complaint to begin with, or they're too young to care, because they're literally 15 and they didn't pay for it. So yeah, if I was Sweet Baby Inc., this is exactly what I would do. I would cause an issue, and then I would slap gamers around the moment they give me the response I'm looking for, and then use it as a way to market myself to other companies, and then I would continue to slap gamers around for the fun of it by working on their favorite games, knowing if they do end up finding out I worked on it, they'll still buy it anyway because they're completely fucking spineless. I think as gamers I can speak for all of us when I say we like diversity and representation because it can give us some good, unique stories. The only problem is when people spend more effort making sure the story is unique than it is good. And you know what? I'm feeling a little bit generous today. I'm no consultant, so we're not going to charge. This will be a free service I'm providing. If we really want to make games diverse and representative, then I think we have the means and technology to do that right now, just using AI and a new page in the settings called diversity settings. It took me 20 minutes to make up this entire concept, and 15 of those minutes were spent photoshopping it. It maybe took me 5 minutes to think of this off the top of my head. So I know for a fact, if this was the actual issue, if representation was an actual concern, then someone far smarter than me would have already implemented this in most AAA games. Let's say you're a skinhead who's so racist you won't even walk into a dark room. Well, in that case, you can make it so the only people you see is straight white skinheads, you know? You can make sure that those are the only people that you're going to see during your gameplay experience to make sure that you're never not represented, and to make sure that you hear from like-minded people and have your experience told. But at the same time, if you're a diversity and inclusivity super enthusiast to where you don't even want to see someone who looks or thinks remotely like you, well, you can make sure that that happens too. That way, no matter how inclusive or exclusive you are, you get to have the gameplay experience you want. No one needs to tell you what you need to believe. No one cares. You're playing a game, and if you want to force those beliefs onto your game, that's strange, but at least you have the option to do so individually instead of trying to, do the Minecraft mob vote for what politics a game should force on everybody who wants to play it. Now you might be saying, wait, if I have a straight Hispanic male Christian lead, how are we going to make him sound like a trans black Muslim female? And the answer is, we've had AI voice changing tech for free that's been of high quality for at least a year. So I'd imagine the modern paid variants of these AI voice changers would be extremely effective at pretty much being able to alter anyone's voice to sound like anyone they want to represent. And just in case the person is worried that they have so much subconscious bias that when they're editing these gender ratios and race distributions and identity models, that bias is going to, slip through and they're going to be less representative than they should have, well, congrats. We can take that fear away from you by adding that distribution randomizer. All you got to do is check that box, hit randomize, and boom, don't worry about your subconscious bias. The randomizer will take that bias out for you and pick random numbers. So whether you're inclusive or exclusive, and whether your bias is conscious or subconscious, you can make sure that you have a diverse experience, or you can make sure you have the most representative experience that you want. And you might go, whoa, normally NPCs take a bunch of presets and they kind of just, randomize them. It's going to be really hard to generate a bunch of specific ratios of NPCs. And to that I say that's pretty inaccurate. In fact, that's probably outright false. You'll notice when you go into a video game area and it's an enemy area, it's only generating NPCs that are enemies with enemy traits. So you go into, Hobbit Town, it's only generating hobbits with hobbit traits. You won't find hobbits with elven traits. You won't find hobbits with dwarven clothing. No. They know how to narrow down the pool of the presets that are selected from to make sure that the NPC is contextually how they should look. But if we get to decide what that context is in the situations where that context is applied, well then we are able to incorporate diversity settings into a game just by adding a few lines of code. Because we can tell it, okay, yeah, we are in Hobbit Town and usually you would only generate hobbits in Hobbit Town, but we've actually decided that everybody in this game is a dwarf, so just generate dwarves with hobbit clothing and hobbit traits. Okay, boom, solved. Some random ass commentary slop channel should not be able to make a reasonable pitch for a solution to that problem in 15 minutes when you have teams of thousands of people across all these studios, probably tens of thousands of people who could have come up with far smarter ideas than this, and it would solve all of these issues, and yet they haven't. I don't understand why they haven't. I mean, they could have everything they want, and it doesn't even require a whole new feature set. It just requires adding a couple lines of code to an already very popular existing feature set. You want diversity? You got it. You want to make sure that only you are represented so that your story speaks, bigger volumes? You got it. You get what you want. We have character customization in almost every modern video game. Why don't we have NPC customization? In my opinion, using protected classes but not incorporating anything about, the protected aspect of them into the plot just screams grifter. And they're not grifting to these protected classes either. The people in these protected classes are some of the people speaking out against Sweet Baby Inc. because they feel they are so poorly represented by Sweet Baby, because Sweet Baby Inc. simply just exploits their protected class for the ESG gain without representing it properly with good quality writing. To pander to protected classes, you would have to provide the protected classes something that they enjoy, something they want. And they don't want to be represented poorly by bad writers exploiting their titles and identities. And they're not grifting to these gaming companies either. No one wants to write a script and go, this is perfect, this is everything I envisioned, and then have someone come along and go, it's everything you envisioned, but what you envisioned isn't very inclusive, so honestly, I think I could make a change here, 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 and here, and by the way, it's going to cost you some money too. No, they're going to kind of take that as racketeering, or at least an insult to their work, and they're probably not going to want to pay for that service. The people Sweet Baby Inc. is grifting to is the investors who are so paranoid at risk that someone like Sweet Baby Inc. going, well, we're almost exclusively protected people, so if we work on your game, it's impossible to be canceled. Those investors are going to go, wow, that's like zero risk whatsoever, The only thing that could get our game destroyed, the only thing that can make our investments read red is our game getting canceled. And they are the uncancelables. No, in my opinion, The thing that Sweet Baby Inc. is pandering to is investors who are so paranoid about risk that they aren't willing to deal with even the tiniest chance of their investments going red. No. They only need to go green. All that matters, not the stability of the company, not the quality of the product. All that matters is that this line goes up and this number stays green. So if Sweet Baby Inc. comes and claims as the incancelable team they are of writing staff that they can make our game not have any risk associated with it in terms of online outrage, well, boom, we ought to hire them. And you can get mad at Sweet Baby Inc. all you want, but at the end of the day, I actually applaud them for being smart business people. They noticed that ESG scores are very popular. They noticed how paranoid investors are and how unwilling they are to make anything short of just breaking even, if not profits. And they realized all we gotta do is say that we mitigate risk. And these schizophrenically paranoid investors will eat it up and they will pay us whatever it takes to avoid seeing red for a moment. I can't even be mad at that because you're looking at the most paranoid people with the most money at their disposal and you're figuring out how to sell them something that you know they can't resist. That is admirable. The only issue is that the trickle-down effect of that grifting does impact the quality of the games you are working on. At the very least, if you're going to do something so smart, put a little bit of that intelligence into the scripts and make sure that the people you are representing authentically and you are representing well in a way that is integrated properly into the script. Everybody's got to make money somehow and I can't knock them for it. Just make sure the way that you are making your money isn't detrimental to the people that you're trying to help with your service. The main service that I would argue Sweet Baby Inc. provides is not writing, not diversity, it is risk mitigation. And so they should understand that harassing people online publicly is very risky to their business. So if they were actually good at risk mitigation, they would realize one of the biggest risks you could take is being public in any capacity, whether good or bad. I mean, seriously, BlackRock and Vanguard, almost exclusively responsible for the housing issues in all across the United States, they don't even get shit. And you want to know why? No one knows they exist because they don't advertise their services and they don't constantly push their shit in your face on social media. No one knows they exist, and as a result, no one criticizes them. Those are actually good risk mitigators. Sweet Baby Inc., a company that is, mostly centered around the concept of mitigating risk, can't even seem to grasp the fact that if they operated in the shadows, they would operate for far longer. Personally, I want this company to exist, and I want them to be more public, and I want them to just start outright bullying gamers so that maybe gamers will finally grow a fucking spine and start boycotting the businesses that do nothing but shit on their entire user base. Almost every fan base, almost every community is used to dealing with people who exploit them for the finances but don't actually care about them, and they learn how to deal with those people and they move on, and then it's harder for those issues to come up again because they already have the tools and knowledge on how to deal with it. Gamers seem to be the exclusive community that have never fucking figured out how to deal with companies that don't care about them, and it's by not buying their products. And you want to know why I think that is? It's because the overwhelming majority of gamers are under 15 and don't even know how to fucking cook a meal for themselves. So when you ask them about socioeconomic issues and about how it impacts games and how that impacts society, they truly could not give less of a shit. In fact, I doubt they even paid for the games. I bet their parents bought it for them. Instead of consuming slop and crying about how you're consuming slop all the time, just go pay for games that don't do that. If all the AAA companies are doing this practice, just don't buy AAA games. It is truly that simple. I don't know why you are intent on consuming what you perceive as poison simply because you cannot overcome your addiction to always be, distracting your thoughts with video games. Grow a spine, find some other hobbies other than video games, and then you won't be crying when the latest game isn't so great because you'll have other things to do with your free time. It's like video games for these people is like being addicted to cigarettes, but at least a smoker will go, oh, I gotta quit smoking. No, gamers will go, no, you gotta make cigarettes healthier. I can't kick my addiction, so you ought to make the cigarettes healthier so that my time smoking's a little more pleasant. If the games are shit, acknowledge that you're buying shit games and stop buying them. It's like video games for these people is like being addicted to cigarettes, but at least a smoker will go, oh, I gotta quit smoking. No, gamers will go, no, you gotta make cigarettes healthier. I can't kick my addiction, so you ought to make the cigarettes healthier so that my time smoking's a little more pleasant. If the games are shit, acknowledge that you're buying shit games and stop buying them. No one is forcing you at gunpoint to buy the latest Call of Duty title just because it says Call of Duty. So when you hit me with the, Another bad COD. I can't believe Activision doesn't care about us. I can't believe you don't care about you enough to not use pattern recognition and realize you shouldn't have given them your fucking money to begin with because you're just incentivizing them. You are rewarding them for this slop. So yeah, Sweet Baby Inc. is bad for monetizing oppression, but if there's any monetizable group worth oppressing simply for the fun of it and because they won't stand up for themselves, it is gamers, because they're complete spineless cowards who don't realize that they vote with their wallets and not their Twitter feed. I think gamers are equally as detrimental to the progression of consumer rights as Sweet Baby Inc. is, because gamers are the ultimate example of what doormats some consumers will be, and how they'll keep handing you their credit card with a smile even as you walk all over their face and laugh at them. I am on the side of consumer rights here, and unfortunately both Sweet Baby Inc. and gamers seem to be equally detrimental to that cause. So I can't even, unanimously take the side of gamers, because I think that they are also harming people by making corporations see that as long as they avoid enough backlash, they can just walk all over people and they'll smile about it. And that willingness to buy any piece of slop, no matter how much you complain about it, as long as the game isn't too controversial, is the exact reason a company like Sweet Baby Inc. exists to begin with. Because they realized that gamers only boycott games that go viral for negative reasons. So as long as they can provide a service that will keep the game from going viral for negative reasons, there's almost no reason it won't succeed, no matter how bad it is. So congrats, gamers. You are the reason Sweet Baby Inc. exists. The culture of gamers being unwilling to stand up for themselves and not offer their wallets to anyone who's willing to bully them is the reason that a company like Sweet Baby Inc. can exist. So until gamers can learn to stand up for themselves, I cannot in good faith stand up for gamers, because I am pro-consumer rights, and I think gamers are a detriment to consumer rights as a whole, equally as much as Sweet Baby Inc., because the only reason a company like Sweet Baby Inc. exists is, again, because of them. Gamers are such pushovers that companies have realized it is more financially detrimental to upset people like the Sweet Baby Inc. writers than it is to upset the entirety of gaming communities. And you know what that shows? Even if you disagree with the Sweet Baby Inc. people and their politics, beliefs, whatever, at least they stand for something, and at least they stand for it firmly. Something that your average gamer simply cannot relate to. And for that, I commend the employees of Sweet Baby Inc. And I actually hope they have fun slapping these gamers around, because these gamers need to be slapped around like a child getting disciplined until they learn their lesson. How am I against Sweet Baby Inc. and against gamers? Those are the only two options. Those are the only two sides in this story. So how am I rooting against both of them? Oh wait, it's because I'm pro-consumer rights, and just because they're on opposite sides of this fight doesn't mean they aren't both detrimental to consumer rights as a whole. I hope at the end of the day you realize that Sweet Baby Inc. isn't the problem as much as they are someone who is taking advantage of the problem, which is gamer consumer culture and their lack of spines or willingness to put their wallets away even when they hate the games they're buying. The fact that the spine of the entire gaming community is weaker than the spine of just the Sweet Baby Inc. writing team tells me that gamers do not deserve support right now. They deserve ridicule, they deserve to be laughed at, they have reaped what they sowed. And I hope that this is a lesson to everybody involved, that if you don't stand up for your consumer rights, it will slowly be taken from you. If you don't stand up for good quality products, the product quality will slowly get worse, even if the price doesn't get cheaper. You really have the audacity to tell these companies that they should grow a spine and stand up to Sweet Baby Inc. by not consulting them for their services, when you can't even grow enough of a spine to not buy the games even after you see Sweet Baby Inc., who you claim to hate, is worked on them just because it has a recognizable brand name. You people are a detriment to consumer rights, because other industries are going to look at how gamers are treated and they're going to go, wow, we could practically shit down our customers' throats and they'd pay us for it with a smile. We ought to start incorporating some of these tactics that gamers are using, or that gaming companies are using. And I don't want that to happen. Keep your spineless disease, your transmittable osteoporosis away from other industries, so that we don't have to deal with the consumer exploitation and consumer disregard that you guys do. And until you develop a spine, stop complaining so vocally, because no one cares how much you cry if you're not willing to do anything to circumvent the circumstances creating your tears. So no, the problem isn't Sweet Baby, the problem is real babies who, like infants, lack the basic understanding of cause and effect to realize if you buy bad games, it's going to incentivize those companies to keep putting out cheaper to produce bad games than spending all the time and effort to make a good game that sells the same number of copies. As brutal as I was there, I honestly am hoping for the best for gamers. I myself am one. I am playing a video game in the background of this video, for God's sake. But Jesus Christ, you people need to be the change you want to see if you want to see change. If you want people to stop buying a game, you better make sure that you yourself didn't buy it. Because if you can't hold yourself accountable, how in the hell do you have the audacity to think you have a position to hold others accountable for doing the same things you do? Instead of spending an hour tweeting about how, wow, these companies don't care about me, stay at work an hour late and then take the money you earned from that extra hour and give it to a company that actually does care about their consumers. That's how you see change made. That's how you see progress made. Money is the blood of companies, and like how if you get low on blood, your organs start to fail, if companies start to hemorrhage money, if they start to run out of money, they're going to find ways to stem the bleeding. And you want to know what one of the first things to go will be? Excess spending, like consultant firms, for scripts that have already been written. You could very easily mitigate this problem with very simple actions. In fact, I would say it benefits you more to solve this problem. If you're not paying for games that are bad, that make fun of you and a demographic you might fall into, or represent a demographic you fall into very poorly, well then congrats. Not only are you saving money, you're finding better things to do with your time than to waste it on a product you don't like. I feel like Mr. Krabs ringing the bell when he's been doing the same thing for weeks straight, going fucking insane. Day 15, give it up for day 15. This is the 15th time I feel like I've heard gamers complain about anti-consumer practices, and yet not one of those times have they just stopped buying the products or services that they're complaining about. So I don't care about taking their complaints serious, because they don't even take their own complaints serious enough not to pay these companies and incentivize them to keep fucking them over. With that said, I'm going to have to wrap it up there. I think anything else I say from this point on will just be me talking in circles, and if I play up my emotions for any longer, my entire voice box may just disintegrate. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. This was supposed to be a quick warm-up video just to get back into commentary because I've been very busy with, school work, midterms, all those things. This ended up being the longest video I've recorded so far, and as a result, your attention really helps me in the algorithm, and I truly appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next video, and until then, stay goofy, my goobers.
Come over here and kiss me on my hot mouth.